What's going on, everybody? My name is Shayne Masyoluk. First off, thank you so much for watching this video, and let's jump right into it because I want to tell you guys how to set up your camera so you can get the most cinematic value out of your footage. Let's go. Alright guys, so let's start off with your frames per second. So this is very crucial because this kind of sets the whole framework about what you're going to be shooting, the style, the look, everything. To me, I always start with my frames per second because then I know visually what I'm trying to achieve. There's a couple different options for shooting cinematic footage and filming in that cinematic frame. So 24 and 30 frames are your go-tos. Now the reason why I say 2 is because there's a big debate, and there always has been, I'm pretty sure, about which is better, 24 frames or 30 frames. There's a 6 frame difference in there. To me, I personally much more prefer 24 frames. 30 frames, which is 6 more frames, is also used standard for shooting cinematic footage as well. So really, it's about finding which one you prefer. The best way to find out which one you like better is literally going out and shooting test footage in 24 frames and then 30 frames and seeing which one you like better. So to recap, 24 frames and 30 frames are your go-tos. Okay, so the next part is shutter speed. This is very important, and the reason why I started with frames per second is because the general rule of thumb when you're shooting is your shutter speed is always double your frame rate. So because I shoot in 24, double 24 is 48, so my shutter is usually around 50 to 60, whereas if you're shooting 30 frames, it's 60 to 50. I wouldn't go below 60 if I was shooting 30 frames. So that's basically it for shutter speed. It's pretty simple. You don't want to play around too much with your shutter speed. You don't want to go too much farther below double your frame rate. So say if my frame rate's 24, we're shooting 50 for shutter, I wouldn't go 40 or even 30 because it's going to start to give it this really weird haze, almost ghost effect where I'm going to walk by and then you're going to see a little bit of a trail. So it does work in some instances. You just have to make sure you're knowing what you're going out and shooting and actually trying to capture. As well as if you shoot higher in your shutter speed, it's going to give it, I believe it's called a staccato effect. So it's very jittery and just a lot more choppier, and it almost looks too real or too unreal. It's a weird look. I personally don't play around with them too much. It's just not my style and not something I like doing. To wrap up, whatever your frame rate is, say 24, you double it to create your shutter speed, and that's the average to shoot at. I love to use slow motion in my shots, as I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. I actually shoot most of my stuff in slow motion, so my camera does 96 frames per second and automatically slows it down, but with that 96 frames per second, I can actually have a little bit more room to play with. So if I do want to speed up a shot, or if I do want to slow down a shot even more, I can actually do that without degrading the footage or without making it look really crappy or super jittery or anything like that. I wouldn't recommend shooting in slow motion all the time though, because if you are looking to capture audio, or if you are looking to really capture that nice cinematic in motion and in normal speed, slow motion is going to have a little bit of a harder time conveying that. I find slow motion to be absolutely wonderful for the intros of my videos. You're given a lot more information when you shoot slow motion, so as long as you're aware of that, that's good. So for the frame rates of slow motion, you can shoot 60 would be your minimum, so 60 frames per second would be your minimum for slow motion. Like I said, shoot 96 with my GH4, that's the max it can go. My Phantom 4 can shoot up to 120 frames per second in slow motion, which is pretty incredible. I mean, above that, you're just gonna get like some crazy good shots. But those are kind of like the key ones. As long as you're above 60 frames per second, your slow motion is going to be good. 96 I find very crisp. 120 is even more amazing. So I mean, the higher you go, the more quality your slow motion is going to be. That's just essentially it. For shutter speed for your slow motion, I know my camera locks me out at 100. So if I'm doing 96 frames, I don't actually double it. And I know, I just said that was the rule. You double your frame rate to your shutter speed. But for slow motion, because it's going to be a lot darker, because your shutter speed is going to have to be closer to 125, which allows less light into your camera, you're going to want to play around with it and see what you like. Personally, there are some spots where I get jitters, especially if I'm looking at like a TV or a monitor shooting slow motion. You'll see like lines and actual almost like skips in it, so then I have to up it to about 125 to 160 for my shutter. Whereas if I'm shooting regular people in slow motion, or if I'm shooting a workout montage in slow motion, I really don't find I have too much of a problem adjusting the shutter speed, but play with it, see how it looks, and make sure to watch your shots all the way through as well. That's really gonna help you guys out. That's really gonna help you guys learn and figure out what actually works and what actually doesn't work. So that was all for slow motion. Just to recap, minimum 60 frames per second for slow motion. You really want about 100 for your shutter speed, no lower than 100 I would recommend. Most cameras would lock you out at about 100 as soon as you shoot in slow motion. But general rule applies, double your frame rate, play with it, see how it is, see how it feels. So the last one that I wanted to touch on is the f-stop. So this is what's gonna give you the super blurred background or everything's in focus background. The f-stop is what's gonna control the amount of blur that's in the background, but it also does control the amount of light that's let into your camera. With that in mind, when you are at a low f-stop, your focus point, so what you're actually focusing on, is gonna be a lot tighter. So you're gonna wanna focus one on the eyes because that's how you're gonna get the best focus point. But if you're shooting honestly below like a 2.8, even like a 1.4 f-stop, your background's gonna be amazingly blurred out, but the focus point is gonna be super tight. It's gonna be a lot harder to keep the image in focus, keep the subject in focus if they're moving, or if they're moving forward or backwards, or if they're not a good actor and they just like, they're shaking in their chair. You're gonna see a lot of in and out of focus, and it's hard to adjust it while the scene's going on as well. So to avoid that, bring your f-stop a little higher, even like 3.84. You're still gonna get a nice background, but your whole subject's gonna be in focus. What it depends on is what you're trying to go for. For me personally, I usually keep my f-stop about 2.8. Maybe I'll jump it to 4 if I need to, if there's two people in the shot. But for the most part, 2.8, focus on their eyes or focus on their arms if I'm doing a gym montage or something like that, and just go from there. I really adjust everything off of my frame rate and my f-stop. Everything else gets built around those essentially. So I recommend, if you guys are new to the film game, new to using your camera that's a DSLR and all manual settings, that you start doing this, start putting this into play. Start with your frame rate first, so figure out if you want to shoot 24 frames, 30 frames, 60 frames, 96, 120, and then on top of that, figure out what your f-stop's gonna be at. Do I want things tight and focused? Do I want a nice bokeh, it's called, where the background's all blurred out? I think it's bokeh, bokeh, it's a Japanese word. Don't actually remember what it is. Bokeh, bokeh, okay, bokeh. The last thing that I wanted to touch on is the ISO. We did go over it briefly, but I just wanted to reiterate that you guys do really want to make sure that your ISO is as low as it could possibly get. ISO for me is a last stop for any adding of light. If I want to make the subject brighter, I will first play around with my f-stop, play around with my shutter speed, even play around with my frame rate if I have to. And then I'll go to ISO. I really don't like shooting above 1000 ISO, and I've been thankful enough to not have to do it very often, because it does start to give you your really grainy blacks, and even the whites and stuff are very grainy. So it's not a very appealing look to me. Try and keep your ISO as low as possible, but if you do have to use it, keep it below 1000, and if you do have to go above 1000, just understand it's gonna be grainy as all hell, but you're gonna have to deal with it. You can color correct it in post, but for the most part, it's gonna be grainy, so just understand that. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you did enjoy the video, which I really hope you did do, make sure to subscribe if you're new and join the Beyond Basic crew. That's the culture that we're trying to build here, is taking your film game to the next level, just going beyond what the basics are taught on YouTube. And if you guys have any ideas or if you have any questions, please feel free to DM me on Instagram or slide in on the comment section below and just ask me your question there. I'd be happy to answer them. Till next time, guys, have a fabulous week. Remember, go beyond basic, my friends. Beyond basic.